President Trump promised to drain the swamp here in Washington, but more and more people in the president's orbit are getting bogged down in that swamp. The former campaign chairman Paul Manafort on trial right now for tax and banking violations. His deputy campaign chairman Rick Gates pleaded guilty, just finished testifying against Manafort, as we all know. And don't forget about Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, both of whom have already pleaded guilty. And now the first congressman to endorse President Trump, a Republican, Chris Collins of New York, indicted for insider trading and lying to the FBI. Joining us to discuss that and a lot more, the former White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks, Wolf.
All right, let's talk about the swamp. It seems to be getting deeper and deeper. What's your analysis? What's going on here?
Well, listen, I actually did read through the indictment like the congressman that's just on. I mean, it's a lot of compelling evidence there. But you have to give Chris the opportunity to prove that that stuff is not true. But I do think that there is nefarious activity. As you know, and you remember the Stock Act from 2012, as they were trying to repeal some of the insider trading nonsense that takes place in the Congress. The American people are just fed up with this sort of stuff. So I hope Chris is innocent. But if he's not innocent for some reason, I do expect there to be more cases like this, you know. I mean, there'll be more cases like this either way, but I don't like the activity at all. It's one of the reasons why I've been 30 years on Wall Street. I've never had a trading account for that reason.
Yeah, one of the things that they point out, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York in the charges against him, is that once he got word that that pharmaceutical, that biotech company, that the clinical trials on MS had failed, he was actually at the White House congressional picnic with the president and made that phone call, according to this indictment, to his son from the White House lawn. That was awkward, right?
Well, but that's another reason why you don't have trading accounts and you try to stay above the fray, because what happens is you have all these human impulses, Wolf. And if you get information like that, and he's saying this call was false, but let's say that it wasn't for a second. You get information like that, your human impulse is to save yourself the money. And so it was a lot of money, probably $750,000 according to the indictment. And so if you don't want to drink, you got to stay out of a bar. And if you don't want to get tagged with insider trading when you're loaded up with all that information that you get in the Congress, just don't have a personal trading account.
Yeah, all right, let's discuss Rudy Giuliani while I have you, Anthony. The back and forth that's been going on and whether the president will eventually agree to a sit-down interview with the special counsel, Robert Mueller. Giuliani says he wants the negotiations all wrapped up by September. He also says Republicans could benefit if things drag on during the midterm elections in November. What do you think it is?
Well, I think he's saying if it drags on, it'll galvanize the base and it'll increase the participatory turnout of the people that like the president. It'll sort of be a vote for him in those congressional districts. I'm personally not in love with that strategy. I would like to see this thing completely wrapped up, but it seems unlikely, frankly, that this will get wrapped up before the midterm elections. And so what Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani are working on is a very narrow testimony for the president so that he doesn't get boxed into a potential perjury situation. And so, you know, I was trained in law school. I don't like the idea of the president even going before the prosecutor, frankly, and so I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does come to pass, it would seem unlikely to come to pass given the narrowness of what both Jay and Rudy are suggesting.
You know, it's a simple concept.
I don't think Robert Mueller will go for that, basically. Yeah,
I suspect he won't go for it either. But it's a simple concept, and explain to our viewers why you presumably disagree with the concept. They say to the president of the United States, you know what? If you have nothing to hide, if you've done nothing wrong, just tell the truth and get it over with. What do you say to that?
Well, what I would say to that, if you understand the president's communication style, and this has gone back for 45 years, he's prone to some levels of hyperbole, and he's prone to some levels of, you know, what my grandfather would say, we sometimes remember things the way we would like to remember them as opposed to how they actually happened. And so what would be at risk there is you put him in that room. He believes in his heart and in his brain that he's done absolutely nothing wrong. He wears everything on his sleeve, and he misstates a few things, and he gets nailed for perjury as opposed to obstruction of justice or collusion. And so I think that's the worry that the legal team would have in a situation like that with somebody like the president and with his personality. And so I would do everything I can to avoid that sort of situation, if you will.
So what you're saying is the legal team, the president's advisors, they're really afraid that given the president's history, he could wind up committing perjury or lying during the course of this kind of interview.
Not intentionally, not sitting there, saying things like what the definition of is and things like that, but just, his personality is such where he likes to embellish stories. And so, I'm a friend of his. I want to see him do well. The economy's humming along fantastically. So many good things are happening around the world. This is like a millstone on the White House and the West Wing, and so we'd like to see it pass. But you sometimes have to protect your principal from things that you know about their personalities.
All right, let's move on to some other sensitive issues. And it's causing a bit of a stir right now. The Fox News host, Laura Ingraham, she's facing a lot of blowback over a comment she made about immigration, legal and illegal, by the way, and how it's changing the United States. Listen to this.
In some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for, and most of us don't like. From Virginia to California, we see stark examples of how radically, in some ways, the country has changed. Now, much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love.
All right, so what's your reaction to that?
I'm super not happy with that. I mean, I like her as a person, but if you remember Father Tom Coughlin in the 1930s, my grandparents certainly remember him, and, it's the same rhetoric, it's the same sentence structure, and it's the same level of xenophobia that, frankly, my immigrant grandparents faced as Italian Americans 70, 80 short years ago. So I'm not in love with it. I love the concept of America, the ideas of America, and the great experiment of our republic, where we really are, what Lincoln said, the last best hope for mankind, because we have our diversity. We get our strength from that diversity. And one last point, Lee Kuan Yew once said about America, Wolf, that we have such a competitive advantage around the world because you can come to the United States as a Chinese or a German and become a German American or a Chinese American, but that's not true going to those other countries. And so that's a huge competitive advantage that we have versus the rest of the world in terms of the intellectual capital. And I really wish she wouldn't talk like that because it sounds ignorant. And it's unfortunate, particularly if you know your grandparents' immigration story or you yourself are an immigrant. So I hope she walks it back. I hope she realizes that what she said is it's against the American values that she's supposedly touting.
But does that rev up that base that clearly so supports the president, that kind of language?
Yeah, you see, so I sort of disagree about that because I'm writing a book about this. I'm writing a book called The Blue Collar President about my experiences with the campaign and going into those markets and having grown up in a blue collar family where neither one of my parents went to college. The identification that these people have with the president, they're not nativists, they're not xenophobes. I know they're being portrayed like that on the TV and so forth, but it's a very small population of those people, Wolf, that are like that. If anything, each of these people have an immigration story, and they just want what we all want in the United States is an aspirational economy and an aspirational opportunity for their children. So it may tweak, and it may get a lot of media attention for a small group of people, Wolf, but I really think it's un-American, and by and large, most Americans are great people, and they don't like that sort of nonsense. And
almost all of us are children of immigrants, to be sure, as you correctly point out. Before I let you go quickly, a once loyal Trump aide now admits to secretly recording the President of the United States. We're not talking about Michael Cohen, the President's former lawyer, the President's former fixer. We're talking about the former Apprentice star, the White House advisor, Omarosa. She says she has secret recordings of President Trump, and according to the Daily Beast, she has those tapes. Do you have any knowledge of any of this, and what do you make of the President of the United States being secretly recorded inside the White House?
Well, listen, I don't like the notion that these people are taping the president. Having said that, I like Omarosa a great deal. My guess is there's probably nothing on those tapes, and certainly even though she's writing a book, which I think she's really trying to be objective in the book, I think she's still very loyal to the president. I talked to Omarosa yesterday. She loves the president and the president's family. And I don't think there's anything in those tapes that are going to be explosive or nefarious. But I don't like the notion, if it is true, and I didn't ask her if it is or it isn't, I don't like the notion that people are taping him. Certainly, you know, I got taped by somebody that still comes on your air. I thought he was a friend. I obviously made a mistake making that presumption. That's my fault. I have to own it. But, you know, when you're a good person, you don't think people are going to do that sort of activity. And so that's a naivete on my part, of course, but I'm sure the president's probably miffed that people are taping him without his permission, even though they're in a quote-unquote one-party consent situation where they can just run the tape recorder on him. I don't like it at all. I personally would never do it.
I'm sure he's very upset about it. These are individuals who have worked with him, support him, and secretly recording the president. Obviously, that is very, very awkward. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.